Welcome back, everybody, to the truth about addiction. Today's episode, I'm not going to lie, is a tough one. Actually, it was tougher for me than I anticipated, and also than the guest I had on anticipated. And you'll know why once you dive in. But this man found me on Instagram, and he also has a book. And he thought we might have a really cool conversation. And even though it was a tough one, it's a really important one when it comes to the world of addiction and how deeply rooted addiction is in the family unit. Dr. Brian Licuanan is an author, speaker, and board certified psychologist practicing in Southern California. He specializes in insomnia and family crisis interventions, as well as has extensive experience working with highly acute clients struggling with substance abuse disorders and mental health conditions. Dr. Licuanan is passionate about educating the public on mental health and substance addiction, as he has appeared on The Doctor Show on CBS, Dr. Drew Midday Live, Good Day LA, along with several podcasts, and has authored several articles. Additionally, his book, How to Get Your Resisting Loved One into Treatment, a step-by-step guide for mental health and or addiction crisis, is a strategy guide to help family members with loved ones refusing help or treatment. Last, in order to maintain a sound mind and body, he trains and actively competes in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Here we go.
Never good enough is leaving me for dead. But perfection's just a game of make-believe. Hey, gotta break the pattern, find a new reprieve. Breaking the circuit, making it work.
Welcome back, everybody, to the truth about addiction. I am so excited about this conversation because this man found me. And based on his nature of work in the world, which you'll find out about in a minute, felt called to come on here and have a conversation. And besides wanting to dive into his brain and his background and how he ended up doing the work in the world that he's doing, I personally have so many questions. So I'm so excited for you guys to meet Dr. Brian Licuanan. And he is a doctor of psychology. That's right. And I always joke that in another life, I was a psychologist. So I think one of my most favorite things is to have really authentic, honest conversations that ultimately get to the root of our heartache, which really stems way deep in our psyche. And this man has a book. Like I have a book, and it's called How to Get Your Resisting Loved One into Treatment. If that's not a title that people who are suffering in the family dynamic of addiction aren't attracted to, I don't know what is. So, Dr. Brian, I'm so glad to have you here. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Samantha, as well. Thank you so much for having me. And you're absolutely right. I found you. Um, um, I'm very new to social media as of just a few months ago, and I finally embarked upon it as recommended, of course, with the services in the book. My consultant, my book consultant said, "Hey, you need to get on some social media," and I did. And it's been wonderful reconnecting with people from long past high school, college friends, and meeting new people. And that's how I came across you is I was scrolling through and your video just popped up and I was immediately drawn to you because of your energy. You know, you're working out. I'm a big workout person. I think it was one of your workout videos. So I was like, wow, that is really cool. And then the stuff that you do, the messages you send out there. I was really drawn to that, and so I did reach out to you. I direct messaged you, and I said, "Hey, I love what you do. I'd be more than willing to talk to you, chat with you, come on your
Mm,
podcast, whatever else, because I'm really big in collaboration and teaming up, especially in this arena where um, getting the message out there for people struggling with mental health or substance addictions is really huge. And
mm,
when we can team up and provide knowledge out there and spread awareness, I think it's a really huge thing out there, and I love to take advantage of it. So thank you very much for having
mm.
me come on here.
You are so welcome. Makes me really happy that you stumbled upon my page, and it's really an interesting thing living a spiritual life and living in a highly digital age.
Mhm,
And I have to frequently remind myself of a couple of things when it comes to social media, because my work in the world, probably much like yours, is to cast the widest net possible on who I can
mhm,
help. Social media is unbelievable for that reason. It's an
mhm,
amazing tool, and it can be a little bit soul crushing.
mhm,
Talk about compare and despair. Talk about dopamine addiction.
mhm,
So when I go on there, I really try to be mindful. Why am I on here right now? Am I posting something? Because if I am, it has to provide value to the person on the other side of the screen who I'm trying to help. And I'm not going to spend more than 10 minutes doing it. Or am I going on to respond and engage with that potential customer who's writing a comment on what I posted?
Good.
Because somebody who has a big following said, when you don't respond to someone who's written to you on social media, it's like getting a gift and not saying
Mhm.
thank you. And if you're using it to build your brand, you have to spend some time. And then I need to get off
Ex-
and
e-
live in the real world, and be present for my life. So it's very tricky.
Well, it's funny you say that. The reason why I'm laughing is as being fairly new to social media, is every time someone would like my video, I would direct message them and say, "Thank you for liking my video," and people would respond, "Thank you," or heart emoji, and because that's just my natural inclination. And you're absolutely correct. When someone reaches out to you and takes the time and tells you that, hey, what you shared with me was important. I want to return that importance as well as that
Mm.
recognition and acknowledgement. And so I was laughing because some of my friends or people I know who have been in social media for a long time, I said, they're wondering, I don't know how long you can keep that up, especially if hundreds of people are liking your videos. But right now, I love doing that. When
Yeah.
someone, because like I said, there's nothing more um, acknowledging when you put something out there, important information, and someone says, "Hey, that really helped me. That really resonated with me," and I'm recognizing, yeah, hey, thank you for recognizing that. And so I'm gonna keep doing it. So if you like it, trust me, I will respond to you directly, and I have no intentions of stopping that at least anytime soon. So
I
um,
love that.
yeah.
So I really want to know, before we dive into current day and your book and all the
Mhm.
questions I have
Okay.
about that, a little bit about your backstory.
Mhm.
Who who was little Brian?
Well, little Brian was born in Ohio, actually. I was born in Ohio. I'm Filipino, um, and my family, I'm the middle of three children, and my parents came from the Philippines, and I was born and raised in Ohio and moved out to California. And throughout my life, right, I have family in the helping professions and the health services arena. Grew up in a place of very humbly and gratefully of a very nurturing environment,
Mm,
and also engaged and focused on bettering ourselves through education and competitiveness with sports. And so moved out to California, went to high school, college, graduate school. And what was interesting about my story that I actually write about up front to help connect with my readers is kind of the pathway of my life. It was not direct in any way. For most of my 20s, I did not know what I wanted to do in life. And I was navigating these waters of what do I
mm,
want? What are my passions? While all my friends were graduating and having families, I was still an undergrad for almost 7 years.
Mm.
and tried to go another graduate program too. It didn't work out. And finally, I stumbled upon a field that I sort of knew, and some people had told me that I should pursue, and that was in the psychology arena of helping people. And so it's just one of
Mm.
those things I tell people, find your career, find what you are passionate about, skilled at, in what's in line with your values. And it's really true. When you find that, it's one of the most liberating feelings that you can have. And so currently, as a psychologist practicing out of California, um, I work through teletherapy, private practice, really helping families
Mm.
strategize to get the resisting loved ones to help. Through the National Alliance on Mental Illness for the almost 15 years, I facilitate a support group, helping families educate themselves and instilling hope. And I love giving talks and podcasts, and of course, the book that I wrote to hopefully broaden that message through, like I said, articles, podcasts, interviews, and collaborations like this. So that's a little bit
Yeah.
about who I am. Yeah,
So
till the current time.
well, first of all, let me just say that that is so incredibly relatable. And I think about that all the time when we are so young and yes, literally young, culturally considered young, late teenager, early 20s, but also on a brain level, so psychologically immature. We
Hmm.
are somehow being asked to figure out what we want to do for the rest of our lives. So, no wonder it took you a long time. And I relate to that because what I wanted to do was something in the entertainment industry, but I was
Okay.
really being guided by my mother, whose word in my house was equivalent to God. So anything she said landed in my nervous system in a way where I was like, I better do this or else I'm not
Yes.
safe and I'm not in close proximity to the person who cares
Hmm.
about me the most. And that was go get your degree. But since I wanted to be an artist, it was like, well, get my degree in what? So for me, I had a similar journey. I got a degree in communications after going to two different colleges and taking a year
Nice.
off. And then I was like, this isn't going to cut it because I'm not going to be a marketing expert or in advertising and sit behind a desk from 9 to 5.
Hmm.
So now what? And somebody had planted a seed about physical therapy. And I thought, well, that kind of fits a lot of parts of who I am, checks a lot of boxes. But then I had none of the classes because it's all pre-med. So then I had to go back to school for 2 years just to take the classes to get into physical therapy school. And then that was 3 years. So all of that to say, I think we need to just break out of this cultural conditioning that we're supposed to have it all figured out because we are literally not. And the only reason we're taught that is so we can go out and get a job and make money and fit into this consumerist culture so we can be good little producers, right?
Hmm.
And make money. When the truth of the matter is, we're exactly where we need to be when we
Hmm.
are clueless about what we want to
Hmm.
do in our 20s and for most of that decade. So if you're listening and you relate to that, you are seen and heard, and we both get
Hmm.
it. So
Yeah.
that's number one. Number two, I find it really fascinating that where you landed is in a very particular sector of psychology, which is, you wrote a book about this, about
Mhm.
getting the resisting loved one into treatment. And when you discussed your childhood, you didn't say a thing about addiction. So, have you had any exposure in your growing up to any loved ones who were struggling, any friends who were struggling? And if not, what made you attracted to this particular part of the field?
Well, to answer your first question regarding if anyone, yes, I believe, right, statistically, 1 in 4 people struggle with some type of mental health condition, and for sure. And so I've worked with hundreds of family dynamics, doesn't matter across all levels of socioeconomic status, ethnicities, culture, race. that I say when you lift off the roof of that home, there's some issues going on, and a lot of it's mental health. Sometimes there are cultures or generations that we didn't speak about it, but I think everyone can relate that they had a family member that we weren't quite sure what was going on, but we know something was not right, even as a young child. And so, yes, I did see that navigating through my own struggles in that period of time in those 20s where I was trying to figure something out. I went through a lot of emotions, sort of you feel rejection, lonely,
Mm,
your self-worth gets impaired. And so definitely there was many times in my life, you're right, you bring up that very sensitive period in one's life, which I believe is childhood and adolescence, where a lot of imprinting takes place, and we're so vulnerable to be needed and accepted. I think about as I reflect upon these times of how many different pathways I could have gone, right? I was surrounded with gang members, at least to some degree in the fellowship of people, so I could have gone that route.
mm,
There was times where you're exposed to substances, and of course, just like any other 20-year-old engaging in substances, and could it have gone one way or another? Can partying have been a dependence? And certain losses. So I definitely reflect on gratitude and being grateful, but I definitely could have gone down certain pathways. So
mm,
yes, my own challenges and struggles on a emotional and belief level in myself, and of course, immediate family members and extended family members for sure. But one thing I did do before I went to graduate school, and I think it's one of the most salient parts of my life is I was working for a facility for severely and emotionally abused adolescents here in California. And it
mm,
really was an eye-opening experience for me. These were young kids who witnessed major traumas, been abused, trafficked, witnessed suicides. And it was just very tragic to see how much was they're responsible for, so much how much was put on their emotional backpack to navigate through, and
mm,
me being a part of that daily impact of acknowledging them and helping them hopefully get in this healing process really stuck in my mind. And then I went down these other paths. Then I
mm,
think that biggest reflections where I believe I had a really big impact. And then when I was trying to figure out what I want to do, that resonated, coupled with some people in my life who said, "Hey, you'd be a great psychologist." And so I want to thank those people as well for leading me in that direction. So I think it was a culmination of various factors, but it was an aha moment to me early in my 30s of
mm,
this is what I need to be doing. So
mm. So once you graduated, did you start in the addiction world as a psychologist right away?
it worked out that way. And so I graduated from the University of Oklahoma, and
Mm.
I needed what we call postdoctoral hours. And
Because
many,
by the way, you guys getting your doctorate's not enough.
yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, they need clinical hours. And so the thing is most states require 2,000 hours of clinical hours to get licensed. California, unless it's changed, is 1,500. But someone said, hey, you never know when you might move. Get those 2,000. And so I worked with a psychiatrist, and he's a really ambitious psychiatrist. And immediately within the first few months of working with him, getting my postdoctoral hours, he said, hey, I'm opening up a treatment facility. Do you want to come on board? And I said, absolutely. And so we
Mm,
did. And it was a treatment facility for adults, females and females struggling with significant psychiatric and substance addiction. So I was just dove into it full
mm,
feet first. Yes, I've worked with some clients in the past that struggle with some substances, but that was really a hyperspeed awareness into very, very acute psychiatric conditions coupled with some type of substance dependence or addiction. And so, absolutely, I was there for about almost really it was very fortunate to be exposed to that, and then the support group within that first year as well. That
mm.
psychiatrist said, "Hey, there's a psychiatrist that's been running this group for 18 years, but he's leaving. Do you want to take it over?" And of course, when you first graduate, you're a yes person. Yes, I'll do it. And so I did. And I never said, gosh, there's no way I'm going to be doing this for 18 years. And it's going on 15 years. And I love doing it
Hmm.
and helping those families out there. So that's sort of how I fell upon this. And like I said, things aren't coincidental. I believe things are laid out the way they're supposed to be laid out for you.
Hmm. Okay, so we're gonna get into your book, but I'm gonna start by telling you something that I think is gonna be uh, a great way to just dive in, which
Okay.
is that my initial reaction, my reactive emotional self who has overcome her own addiction,
Mhm.
but who comes from a family full of addicts, who has lost so many people that I love. When I read the title of your book, it made me angry.
Mm.
And I'm so curious to get into this with you because I think from where I sit, and we'll take my most recent loss, which is I don't know if you know this about me actually, but I lost my sister
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
2 years ago to a drug
Mhm.
overdose. And I am 15 years in recovery. When I tell you that I did every single thing
Mhm.
for better and for worse to try
Mhm.
and help her over 2 decades, and that includes controlling and managing and manipulating when I was
Mhm.
in total fear, pressing the program on her,
Mhm.
all the
Yes.
way to my highest self coming to the table in the last 6 months of her life when I knew she was in a relapse, but she adamantly denied it.
Okay.
And she had had horrific bruising on her face, broken nose, cracked tooth, split lip.
Mhm.
I mean, evidence of
Yeah.
how sick she was.
Yeah.
And she clung to her story of slips, trips, and falls.
Mhm.
And I had people calling me left and right from the East Coast, which is where she lived. Have you seen your sister's face? Have you seen your sister's face? I'm
Yeah.
so scared. I'm scared. We have to do something. To which I responded, I have been trying to do something.
Mhm.
She's not ready. I am leading by example. I have extended my hand. She knows I am here and that it is possible, at least for me, but she never believed it was possible for her. I went to bed that night. I woke up the next day. I called her and I said, I've been thinking about what you told me about what happened to your face. And it feels like there's more to the story than what
Mhm.
you shared. And I just want you to know that you're safe to share it with me. That was me putting down every young sister
Mhm.
reactive
Mhm.
emotional response that I wanted
Yes.
to have, where I wanted to beg and scream and kick and sob and
Yes.
pull her into treatment
Mhm.
and subdue her into recovery. And my higher self showed up and just said, you are going to lead with grace and dignity, and you're going to reach your hand out one more time. And she's either going to grab it or she's not. And it's not up to you to save
Mhm.
her as much as you
Mhm.
really want to. And she said, Sam, I know what this looks like. I know it looks crazy. And if there was anyone that I could admit that I relapsed to, it would be you
Wow.
because I know you wouldn't judge me. I promise you that's not what this is. 6 months later, she died.
Uh,
So I say that because there have, thank God, only been a few times in the last 2 years where I have wondered if I should have said or done anything differently,
mhm.
if I should have flown back east when I saw her face and refused to believe that she was fine and done more.
Hmm.
But for the most part, I don't feel guilt or shame. Thank God,
Right.
because I know what that feels like because that happened to me after my dad died and it was a
Hmm.
nightmare the way I tried to run from those feelings. So when I read the title of your book, I thought, does he have a way to
Hmm.
help your resisting loved one get into treatment? Because I couldn't. And so this is, not to put you on the spot, but it's a fascinating conversation because every person who loves an addict
Hmm.
wants more than anything, even if it's coming out sideways and you're enabling them, which is another backwards way of doing it. Or you're screaming at them because you're so
Hmm.
scared and you think maybe they'll hear you this time.
Yeah.
Or you're doing what I did and you're extending your hand and trying to lead with grace and not push, but just attract it by living sober. What do you make of all of this? And how did you reach a point where you said, I have been seeing enough stuff clinically
Hmm.
where I feel like I need to make a book about this
Hmm.
and that what's in this book might actually help. I need to know.
Hmm. Yeah. First and foremost, my sincere thoughts and condolences for the loss of your sister and your father as well. And so, um, sadly, right, you represent a growing number of statistics of people, and that's what I'll speak to about what motivated me in the drive of where this book came from. Um, I also want to recognize your 15-year sobriety. That's really, really huge. And
Thank you.
if there's anything of paying it forward or anything else, whether it be for your sister, your father, your sobriety and your recovery is one way of doing that. And
Mm,
so I want to recognize those first and foremost. Um, And where this book came from was, as I mentioned earlier, is for almost 15 years been facilitating these groups, giving these talks. And what really emerged were these very, very common questions and concerns that people had.
mm,
Well, for example, I don't know what to do. My daughter threatens to commit suicide if we don't allow her to stay at home. Or my husband is threatening to leave the family if I don't back off of his drinking.
mm,
And those type of scenarios that I think a lot of people can relate to. Well, my granddaughter, I know she's drinking alcohol and taking Xanax upstairs in her bedroom, but at least she's not in the street being abused and sex trafficked. And so those are the common things that I've heard where families are stuck in guilt or fear, which are the most, I believe, the most powerful fuel, oil and gas of that feeds this disease.
mm,
And after a while, it was very, really, literally formulaic whenever I would go to these groups, whether it be in the treatment center, the support group that I facilitate, or any families that came forward to me, is these questions were very, very same. It's like there was a template in my mind. And I said, there's something out there missing knowledges. And I would ask family members, I said, is there anything out there, any knowledge out there, any manuals out there or books out there that help to address some of these questions? And a lot of them, surprisingly, ironically, would say, no, there's not. And when I would give these talks, I would have slide presentations, especially since the pandemic when we did a lot of things of Zoom. And people would ask me, hey, can we get a copy of the slides? Do you have a handout? Do you have a pamphlet? Can you put this in some
mm,
type of guide? And it really, really dawned upon me at first, you planted that seed. And it was literally, I talk about it 2020, which we all recognize and know what that was. And I remember very vividly that I was getting cancellation after cancellation, March 2020, on a sunny day like this today. I said, what is going on in this world? And that's when it dawned upon me 2 years, 3 years later, when that seed was planted to maybe write something, I said, this is the time. And I just wrote that book. And what it was all these conversations that I had in these groups with families was literally in my head. And I just started typing for 6 weeks, for like 6 to 8 hours straight. But it was all these conversations. And then, of course, we organized it in some way. But it was, and that, so that's where it came from, is that there are these, what I call these missing knowledges out there
Hmm.
that these people kept asking and they were staying stuck and paralyzed in. And so that's where I came up with the 25 must knows that I write about, which I believe are the 25 most essential knowledge. You could be a therapist yourself. You could have been navigating through this for decades. You could have be brand new to this. But it is, I believe, the most foundational knowledge that people have to be aware of in taking these next action steps.
Can you tell
And
us
so,
what some of those are?
sure, sure, some of those are. Well, the first thing, thank you for asking, is the first thing I tell families, and it's the theme of my book, is to have hope. Because
Mm.
treatment or getting help really does work as long as everyone's doing their part. And that's the most critical part with it. And so, just to let you know, is when I talk about treatment, it's not the formal process of treatment per se. It's not going to a residential, inpatient, intensive outpatient, partial hospitalization program. That is treatment. But what my book is also is how to get your resisting loved ones to a position where they're wanting to accept help. So I want to clarify that as well. And what happens, so that's the first one, is that to have hope, because I've worked with so many dysfunctional and toxic family dynamics. This disease, whatever, how we define a disease, has fractured families. There's loss, but through the recovery or sobriety process, I've seen families become closer together than they've ever been because of the healing and the work that they all do. But everyone has to do their part. And one thing I say as well is that everyone in that immediate family system, let's say, I'm not sure how many people were in your immediate family system. Let's say it was, can I ask you, how many would you say was in that immediate system? So it was your sister, you,
Mom and dad, that's it.
mom and dad. So four.
Hmm.
Okay. So I call that the primary support system. I imagine people being on a rowboat, right? If you've ever rowed a boat before, how do you maximize your speed and distance? Everyone is working 100% on their part. Does that mean everyone is equally athletic, equally talented, equally strong? No. But on that boat, everyone has to assume, in your family of four, 25% responsibility no matter what has gone on. And you have to work 100% on your 25%. Okay. And that includes your sister and everybody else. It's because one
So,
of the things go ahead.
no, finish what you're saying, and then I want to ask you something.
And so one of the things that the must knows is what happens a lot. We tend to correlate the degree of harm or hurt someone's caused is usually the degree of work they have to do to get better. But everyone's contributed. There's a saying, as you may be familiar with in recovery, the 3 C's. You didn't cause it, you can't cure it, you can't control it. But I say you perpetuate it in some form or fashion. Just because you're coming from a good place doesn't mean it's always the best or the right place. And that's another must know. So those are some of the highlights among others, but that's the
Mm.
biggest one, is you got to have hope. You just got to change the plan. The love has to look different. It's not so much about tough love, which comes to a good place. I call it assertive love. Assertive love is meaning well, but you get a lot of people that look at it as I call tough luck. Hey, we're done with you. Until you get better, we're done. And when someone's struggling and alone and depressed and helpless and hopeless, that just reinforces to tap out and give up. But you can still have a balance of having rules and boundaries, but also relationship. Go ahead. You were going to ask me something?
So let's just get into a real time scenario, right? In my
Okay.
family dynamic, I was the only one giving my 100% of my 25%
Okay.
because my father and my sister were very, very close, but he was the family
Mhm.
enabler. So he would
Okay.
still bring her prescription pills. He had an idea that she was messing around with substance. I don't think he had a real clue, even though I surely told him and I said, "You are contributing." to her
Hmm.
sickness. And it made
Hmm.
me so angry, which was part of why when he died, I had a lot of
Hmm.
guilt because I was always coming to my interactions with him with that chip on my shoulder because I
Yeah.
felt like he was keeping my
Yeah.
family sick and I couldn't quite
Okay.
forgive him for that. So my dad was assisting in her addiction, and my mother
Yes.
and my sister were estranged, and my sister had a stockpile of resentment against my mother, and my mom is the kind of person who really has no skill set for personal accountability.
Okay.
She is a martyr through and through.
Okay.
And so what happens when in the family dynamic, if there's four people in the rowboat, but only one is doing their part, and I'm the only one that's holding on to hope and that's
Hmm.
steering the ship, what would you say to somebody like me in that
Hmm.
situation?
You ask a very good question. As you were speaking, there was a lot of thoughts that go in my mind, so you might have to track me back. Do you mind if I mention a few things before we come back to that question?
Absolutely.
And
Go
it's
ahead.
it's a couple of the must know. So one of the biggest things also, in addition to tough love, well, when families say, "God, we were just being tough on her," that's what we're told. It's well-meaning. That's what they're taught in some meetings or support groups, but redefining, reconceptualizing it. But another one is enabling. I get people coming to my group, oh my God, enabling is such a curse word. I literally write, enabling is not a curse word. If you think about it, you being a parent, me being a parent myself, is enabling actually comes from a place of love and care. That's
Yep.
what we do. When our loved one is hungry, we give them nourishment. When they lose a job, we give them resources. When they get evicted from an apartment, we give them shelter. That's what we do. It comes from a place of love. But what happens is those same actions will perpetuate the problem that we're trying to mitigate or work on. If someone loses their third car after their third DUI and we give them money for Uber or transportation, where's the motivation to stay sober and to be responsible, right? If someone loses a job because of their chronic alcoholism, and we continue to fund their living arrangements, where's the motivation to make those changes? So that's one of the things I want to mention as well. It's one of the must knows. And another thing too is if I may ask you,
Mhm.
three words, and no one's ever got it exactly right, unless you read my book, unless you get it, you could be the first. So three words, simple words of why people, for example, use substances chronically. Three words why they do it. Can you give me three words?
Trauma, guilt, and shame.
Okay. Absolutely, those are correct, but it's not the one I'm looking for.
Mhm.
But the must know is more general than that
Mm.
because it works. Right? It works for what it was originally intended. But obviously, over time, we get tolerant, it becomes counterproductive and dysfunctional. If you drink alcohol to take the edge off, if you smoke some THC to be a little bit more relaxed in social situations, you do it because it works.
Mhm.
Okay, another one, and it's not the exact one. The reason why, for example, your sister or other people can struggle chronically, long lasting time, three words why your sister or other people who are dealing with this can continue to struggle and be like this.
Well, I can't do it in three words, but what I believe to be true for people who are stuck in emotional cycles of dysfunction, including
Mhm.
addiction, is that the fear and pain of what they will have to face when they
Mhm.
stop is greater than the fear and pain that they're currently living in. So they will choose that dysfunction over the unknown.
And that is correct as well. But if we take it back a step more in general, The reason why people can continue to chronically struggle, and especially in a family dynamic, is because they can, right? And you mentioned that with your father, is they because they can. Someone or someone's are co-signing
Yep.
that ability to struggle. And your dad was coming from a loving, caring place. So one thing I tell family members as well, the three inevitable consequences, and these aren't my own words, you get this in different recovery arenas. I add on to it a little bit, but the three inevitable consequences to untreated mental health or substance addiction is that person or persons will end up in jail, hospital, or they lose their life. Homelessness is temporary. Eventually, if they don't get help, they'll end up in jail, hospital, or they lose their life. And not only lose their life,
Mm-hmm.
they can take someone else's life, or maybe in some type of unhealthy episode, put themselves in a dangerous situation where they harm themselves or lose their life or lose someone else, cause harm to someone else. Or it can fracture families, divorce, bankruptcies. Okay. And so sometimes we always think of that person. They're the ones struggling. They can lose their life, but we don't look at the collateral effects that can happen. I literally had a mother. Her child was 50s and chronically struggling with alcohol for decades. She had a quadruple bypass surgery at 80 years of age because of the stress that she was going through, because um, her child at 50 years old would have court cases, go to treatment while in the court case. When the court case is over or they be the judge, the person goes out and drinking again just to say, like, I've been in treatment, just to put face there. They're not being authentic, say, yes, Your Honor, I'm in treatment, and then go back to that. And the other sibling was very frustrated. The mom is because he's has no motivation to get better, and she continues to endorse and co-sign that lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, because it works and because they can. And so, for your family, back to your question, is when I call that primary support system, and you have that great visual imagery, and that's what I created with the boat, is that primary support system that I call that are in that boat. What happens, and it happens a lot in struggling family dynamics, is you get one to two people rowing the boat. And then after a while, that other person says, forget this. I'm not rowing my boat. I got my own life. And then you got two people rowing it. And then all of a sudden, one person. And it sounds like you're the one person rowing that boat. And then you get burnt out. And that's what happens. And so, what I would say for your family right now, especially those people that want immediate change, is right now just be a boat of you and your sister and getting her on board. Like, hey, I need you, right? I want to work with you. Let's do this. So you would assume 50% responsibility and work your 100%. And there's going to be a fleet of people around you, and your parents can be involved in maybe some part of the process. But that's where the guide came, is because there had to be some intervention prior. Because if the family's not on board, if they're not creating a unified vision, we have to vet that. And even if it's your dad or your mom, and say, Mom and Dad, I know you love, our sister, and um, I want to, there's a strategy that I have, and I want to get better. And it's just going to be me and her in this process, if you're okay for that. But you can be part of what I call the secondary support system, where they're still there and care, but they're not ready to be in that primary part where it's the storm. And until your dad gets some healing, that's when I talk about is that everyone's in recovery, all hands on deck. So your dad, I would recommend, hey, Dad, let's get you some support. Let's get you into therapy, whatever's going on. But you have to accept. I don't think we can ever accept as a parent emotionally that we can ever outlive our children. But we have to accept the reality. And that's where we stay paralyzed, because your sister, knowing very little, the longer she stayed in that state, the unhealthier she was getting, and the harder it is to break from that lifestyle, because this is the narrative that she created for herself. Because it's your dad, in some ways, coming from a loving place, kept putting fuel in her tank, right? Even if it's metaphorically speaking, that little money here and there, that little hotel, that little motel, they don't need a lot to keep on going. And that's one thing I talk about in the must knows, is we have to drain that gas tank, and that little food that we provide, that little thing. We don't put them in a point of desperation where their only option is to get help. And so when we're put in a point of desperation, we'll do almost anything to relieve that pain. And sometimes that may be losing their life, but most times people don't want to die. They just want the pain to stop.
Yes. So, I, the amount of work I have had to do
Mhm.
on myself being the cycle breaker in my family
Hmm.
where everyone
Yeah.
else has stayed sick and has
Hmm.
died sick
Hmm.
is extensive. So, in regards to deeply understanding
Hmm.
that addiction, not just through the lens of my own life, but through my
Hmm.
sisters, my mother's, my father's,
Hmm.
is a solution to the problem. And then it becomes the problem itself later
Hmm.
on. I know that in my bones. When it
Hmm.
comes to codependency
Hmm.
and the root of it all being that this is literally how my father showed his love, and
Hmm.
that that was really the best he could do
Hmm.
because his skills were limited, and knowing that it wasn't coming from a malicious place. I mean,
Hmm.
I know this stuff in my bones, right?
Hmm.
Being a person whose role in my family from the gate was to self abandon, people please, fix, save, moderate, and having to recover my
Hmm.
real self from that state, which shows up everywhere and in
Hmm.
everything I do when I'm in fear. I mean, I used to joke when I would speak in rooms of recovery that my first addiction and my deepest is to control.
Hmm.
Now I might even say my first and deepest addiction is self abandonment and people pleasing. And I say that because part of my recovery in therapy and in 12 step meetings is to not be the firefighter
Hmm.
running in
Exactly.
and fixing and saving and rowing the boat, not with my immediate family members who can't help because they're actually sinking the ship,
Hmm.
but then rowing it towards other people, which, by the way, I've tried to do, right? I mean, there was a woman who I love. She's a very good friend of mine who came over to my dirty, tiny New York City apartment the night I overdosed. 3 years later, she called me because she was driving drunk with her kids in the car and said, I think I need to
Oh,
get sober. I was her Eskimo. She got sober. She's now a longtime sober friend who
yeah.
happened to live 10 minutes from my sister, who at one time
Mm.
sponsored her. Then my
Oh,
sister went out again. And in another moment of crisis where I had a little window of opportunity to help my sister, I rowed the boat to her and I said,
yes.
can you please go to my sister's house right now? She's coming down from a high. She's very scared. Maybe we can get her to go to treatment right now in this moment. And my sister refused. She was the only secondary family
Yeah.
I could think of,
Yeah.
and it didn't work. And I had to, for my own mental health,
Hmm.
learn again and again how to balance the part of me that could intervene, that knew that I was the
Yeah.
person that she could hear and respected and wanted
Got
to
it.
be like, and also that I had spent my whole life trying to save everyone else at the expense of myself. And I
Exactly.
was constantly straddling the tension between who I was and who I was becoming.
Yes.
And so, even though I hear what you're saying, and I've attempted and I had attempted to do that in whatever way I could, I also had to learn how to stand down
Yes.
because I would not be okay if I had
Yes.
spent my entire recovery
Yes.
trying to save her.
Hmm.
So, what do you say to me, knowing that the root of all my trouble was in trying to play that exact role in the family
Hmm.
dynamic that you're suggesting? I play to help her.
Mhm. Well, as you're talking, I could just feel the energy, the emotional and physical energy of that you went through in trying to be that person and to be that saving person. And um, one thing I would tell you if I was to work with you back at that point is that's your 25% that you need to work 100% on. What the part of it is that wounded part of yourself. I know nothing about your historical story, but it would be that wounded, whether it be we call it the inner child, whatever else, because all that stuff, the saving, the fixing, the people pleasing, was a compensation for some deficiencies, some fractures, some voids in your own life. And that's how it manifested. Because the thing is, what happens a lot with altruism is we see it all the time on paper. My God, you just do everything for people. You go out of your way, and we look at it on paper like, wow, that's wonderful. And we jump to that conclusion because that's sort of a culture that we live in is when we do for others, be of service to others. We don't realize that there's a spectrum, there's a gauge on that. When we're overdoing it, we're overcompensating. There's a wonderful quote that I came across some years ago. It's the degree of one's coping mechanism is directly proportional to one's degree of pain. The degree of one's coping mechanism is directly proportional to one's degree of pain. And so we know that our goal in life is to achieve some type of balance, whether it be in our bodies, whether it be in a family system, someone calls up at work, someone had to pick up, we have to pick up the responsibilities to bring balance. So any type of systems goals to achieve balance. There's healthy ways to achieve balance. There's therapy, there's prayer, there's journaling, there's mindfulness techniques, there's exercise.
Mm-hmm.
But people that struggle, there's unhealthy ways to bring that balance. And what I'm hearing you saying, that's what it worked. Again, the reason why you people pleased in your own words, the reason why you fixed, the reason why you saved people is because it worked
Yep.
for what it was originally intended to make you feel, to validate yourself. And my
Yep.
sense with you is you did not have a lot of validation, right? You, for whatever reason, were invalidated, weren't acknowledged, and your way of compensating for that pain is through those tactics. And that's what happened to at fault, where you would do it to the point where it was unhealthy for not only yourself, but the other person. And that's one thing we don't allow. I think a lot of what's happening in our society and culture is we're not allowing people to navigate through discomfort. You've heard of the helicopter parent, correct? Have you ever heard
Oh,
of
yeah.
the lawnmower parent?
Is that the opposite?
No, it's a different take on it. So there was an article that came out some years ago. It was a true article as this father rushed into his daughter's school and he said, "Hey, I need to see my daughter." And he says, "What's going on?" Let's call him Mr. Smith. "What's wrong, Mr. Smith?" "I just need to see my daughter's teacher. Can I see my daughter's teacher?" She said, "If you're okay." She goes, "Okay, I just need to see her." And so they called the daughter's teacher. The daughter's teacher came out and said, "Mr. Smith, what's going on? Is everything okay?" He goes, "Yes. Can you give this water container to my daughter? She forgot it at home." And it really highlighted what they call the lawnmower parent, which we take out like a lawnmower, take out all the obstacles out of the way to avoid any person, especially children, to feel discomfort. And we forget about that discomfort is where growth takes place. You're a
Mhm.
physical therapist, right? I'm thinking about you because my mom had knee surgery and she was in a lot of pain, physical therapy, but she knows that pain is where the growth and change takes place. And and that's what we don't do. And I think that's what happens is when we do things for other people too much, we deprive them of navigating through their own solutions and they get comfortable in that dynamic. It sounded like there was this loving relationship between your sister, but there was an entanglement and where sometimes we overly emphasize how much power we have over something. Right? I can save you. I can be that difference maker. I see that in a lot of toxic relationships. No, I'm going to be the one to get this person sober. No, you know what? They didn't have a parent in their life. I'm going to be that father figure. I'm going to be that mother figure. And that disease loves that dynamic. It loves that dynamic. And um, so the disease, if I may say, right, the first thing we think of is, what substance do you have or what medical condition or mental health condition? No, to me, we all have a disease. A disease is any entity in our life that causes impairment. It's been chronic. Jealousy, rage, greed, racism, gluttony, right? And pride, envy, all those are diseases if they cause impairment in our life. So we all have a version of disease and we all have our version of recovery. Recovery is not just substance related. It's not medical, just medically related. It's our plan in place for healthier living. And so that's how what I would say to you if I was to work with you then is, hey, we're focusing on your sister, everything outside of you, everyone else. We need to look within. That's where the healing needs to take place. Let's those fractures that you've experienced in all your life,
So
the
so then
invalidation.
so yes, and I've done a shit ton of work on that.
Yeah.
So then how do you take that knowing that that is exactly the healing I need and rectify it with how to get your resisting loved one into treatment?
Yeah.
Because they don't go together.
Yes.
I what do you say to the person like me who eventually came from a healed place? I mean, when I tell you, me saying to my sister, it feels like there's more to the story than what you shared. And I want you to know that if there is, you're
Mhm.
safe to share it with me. That was the most healed part of me, extending my hand in a really gentle way. And she didn't take it.
I know.
And then
And
she died. So, what about the people who've tried to get their resisting loved ones into treatment
I know.
and it doesn't work?
And that is what I mentioned earlier. That is humbly or in a positive way is those type of situations. I know it's not it's tough to hear it, but your situation with your sister are what we call I call outliers, right? We have the bell-shaped curve. Those are the outliers. Those people that when we're doing everything correct, that sometimes, and that's why I talk about those inevitable consequences, when that person isn't accepting help, there's that very real possibility. And that's what it is. And no matter what we do and what we can, but what I have found out is no matter what you've done, right, there is something in some form or fashion in something in her life that was not allowing her to get to that point where she could be in that moment of an aha moment is I want to change, right? Some of the best things I've ever heard from people is I'm done. Not done living, but I am done with this lifestyle. And for whatever she was going through, she didn't get to that point. And you could do everything you can. And that's the harsh reality. I know it's easier for me to say it from here to say it that no matter what we do, we have to accept that. But what I was focusing on that is when we don't accept that reality, we stay stuck in fear. And with what happened with your sister is is those realities when we truly believe we did everything we can, that they fall into that category. And so I don't know the nature of her passing and so forth. And so, but most people that want to die don't want to die. They just want that pain to stop. And she was in immense pain, and for whatever reason, um, she was scared. She was whatever that resistance was. The resistance is just a manifestation of something else. It was fear, hopelessness, whatever it may be, guilt, and and that's where the acceptance part. I'm so glad to hear part of your recovery is to accept
Mm-hmm.
that I am not harboring that guilt, that I was powerless. So powerless, we hear that again in recovery, and people come with it. What do you mean, Dr. Brian? Powerless? I'm not weak. I said, no, powerless just means that this thing, I can't do this thing on my own,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's why fellowship, as you know, is critically important. This disease thrives on isolation on one-on-one. You take this disease on one-on-one, as you may know, I got this. Some of the worst words I can ever hear someone in the recovery process is I got this, right? And and so, um, like I said, without knowing so much about your your family dynamic and your sister. You did what you could. Somewhere along the line there, I'd love to see was what was perpetuating her to not to get to that point where I need help, I want to change. And and like I said, usually what I have found 95% of the time there is some entity, a person, place, situation, or thing that is allowing that person to stay unwell. I don't know her living circumstances, if she was able to pay for her place. I don't know if she was living on her own. How was she funding that place? Right. And some of the best places I've seen, we would never think about it as a parent myself. Some of the best places that someone's ever got to get help in a point of desperation is they were either homeless, they end up in jail, have a legal case, or they were in a hospital. That is some of the point of desperation where people say, wow, I need to make a change. And so, like I said, I don't know, your sister situation may be very similar to a lot of the families I work with is, yeah, we did everything we can, but he's, okay, where's he living? Well, he's in an apartment. Who's paying for that apartment? Well, we are. Well, we don't want to be in the street. But like I said, some of the most profound cases, desperate cases where people were lack the basic resources because families set that boundary. And when we say assertive love means, hey, we're always going to love and care about you. We just can't support this lifestyle, unhealthy lifestyle any longer. And so that puts the option on them. And so I'm wondering if your sister or another with other dynamics like this is they feel like they had no choice. I don't know if she had a choice. And so that's what we have to do is, hey, this is what you can have. You can have a family, you're going to have a sister, you can have people that love you as long as you make that choice to get better. But we're not going to go over here and support this lifestyle. This is what we're going to be a part of and support. So my
Well,
sense, yeah.
it's complicated, right? And
Hmm.
I will never know. I don't get
Hmm.
to know
Yeah.
that, and she had financial resources. That was not in her favor, for sure. She also had my father. She hated my mother. She loved my father, and my father was co-signing her addiction. So,
Hmm.
right out of the gate,
Yeah.
this was not going to be easy for me or good for her,
Hmm.
right? I will never know that even with the financial support
Hmm.
she had,
Hmm.
whether or not, if my whole family unit were so intact and we all got on that rowboat together,
Hmm.
if it would have helped save her life.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard pill to
That's a hard
swallow
one to swallow.
because I was truly on that ship alone.
Yeah.
That said, when you take all of it away,
Hmm.
when you take, okay, I'm the one in the immediate family dynamic who's trying to do it all. Yes, she has the money. Yes, she's being a little bit enabled by my father. I think as a recovering addict myself, knowing full well what I was covering up when I was drinking and
Hmm.
using,
Okay.
and then knowing full well at 5 years of sobriety and hitting my actual rock bottom in a marital crisis and watching many other people, not just my sister I love, die. It is my belief that shame,
Yes.
not guilt, that's
Hmm.
not strong enough. And fear is a part of it, but I don't think that's strong enough. I think shame
Yes.
left untreated
Yes.
is the number one killer of our spirit. And if we let it go long enough, of our lives.
It's coincidental and ironic that you mentioned that because just a few weeks ago, I was on a podcast called Erasing Shame. And the leading question he says is, what does you think about shame? And so I paused for a moment and I said, number one, shame, how I interpret it, is harboring a great deal of humiliation of having done something or having something done to you. And I said that shame is one of the biggest barriers for people to get help. And that's where conversations like this is we destigmatize some of the best group dynamic shares I've ever had is when someone reveals something very, very secretive about their life. A male being sexually abused, a female engaging in some behavior is because it gives people permission. What we're doing today is we're giving people out there permission to move out of shame, right? To validate that, hey, I struggle just like you. And we take away that feeling sense of humiliation. And so I'm glad you bring that up. And if I may say one thing too that you say with, and the reason why I created this manual is the family intervention wouldn't be on your sister, so to speak. Yes, she needed an intervention. The intervention is the family. And that's what I focus on. When people come into treatment, it's definitely the hard part to get there. But on some levels, on a clinical perspective, it's the easy part because now your loved one's in a place with structure, routine, accountability. They're in a program. There's therapy groups. There's medication. There's sleep. There's food. I don't focus on that person because the system will take care of itself. My intervention now is on the family because when that
Yep.
person steps out that door, day 45, day 60, day 90, whatever, if that family dynamic hasn't changed, the probability of success dramatically plummets. And so that's what I would do with your family is I'd say, hey, dad, right? It's I don't know if you had or if he was in therapy or whatever else, or if there was some family intervention, but the family intervention I would have focused immediately on the family. I would have got you, mom, and dad, sit you down in the room. Is this is where the healing needs to take place, has to begin,
Yeah.
and that will eventually translate into your daughter getting to a point. But your sister was never at a point, even if it's a small little increment or a chink in the armor. We know that a mouse can fit through a hole the size of a dime. This disease will find every chink any way it can, and it doesn't take long to sustain that gas tank. Your your sister didn't run out of that gas tank. Yes, in some ways she did. That was the horrible consequences of that. But in terms of keep going with that lifestyle, she had a gas tank to fuel. I've had people say, "Well, I'm only giving my son $5 a week or my daughter." Trust me, that can go a long way, as you know.
Oh, yeah.
$5. I tell people all the time, you give someone a nickel and you tell them that there's free heroin 70 miles away, boy, they'll find a way to get there. But they can't
Yeah.
apply for a job, right? They can't work, a part-time job. They can't fill out a job application. And that's just tells you the complexity of this disease. Um, but I'm hoping with your listeners out there that they're hearing that that don't be paralyzed by shame, guilt, and fear because that is what keeps people stuck.
Mhm.
And what happened with your sister, I find, and a lot of times when even if the family's doing all they can, that is usually not the outcome. But as we talk about, there was still something going on in the family dynamic that allowed your sister to go on with this lifestyle. And sooner or later, there's a max point where your body or whatever else says, we're done and done, not the in the good way, we're the done, but I'm done. I can't
Yep.
do this anymore. So, and,
Well, it
and if I
was,
may ask you,
yeah.
the title was triggering for you. You
Mhm.
mentioned that earlier, and I'm assuming it will be for a lot of people, very provocative on many levels. Can you clarify why that was emotionally triggering for you?
Yeah. And I also have to wrap up
Me too.
because I do want people to know where to find you. But I will
Okay.
say, as uh, first of all, I mean, now we're in a fentanyl crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So people overdosing and dying is
Mm-hmm.
front and center right now, and
Mm-hmm.
it's more serious than ever because you could
Mm-hmm.
not even be an addict. You could just be a young kid experimenting and you can
Yes.
die, right?
Yes.
So all that to say, it's sort of a worst fear realized, right? No parent, no sibling
Yes.
wants to live through the
Mm-hmm.
death of their loved one.
Mm-hmm.
And it is one of the most normal things because you're so powerless over the loss to try and replay the tape and make sense of what happened and try to figure out so as not to have it ever happen again. Ha ha ha.
Hmm.
If there was anything you
Exactly.
could have said or done. That's what the ego does when it feels wildly out of
Hmm.
control. It tries to make sense so you can maybe control the outcome in the future. So when a title says, How to Get Your Resisting Loved One into Treatment, it implies that there is something I could have said or done.
Mm.
And it touches on that wound
Yeah.
where I am trying not to live in a place of guilt and shame because I
Got it.
literally feel like not only did I try everything, I was the only one.
Yes.
And it just activates
Yes. I
all
get that.
of that inside of me. So it's like, woo, like it's tricky. And at the same time, I get it. And I get why if there is a plethora of information in one place where families are clueless about
Hmm.
where to start and what to do, and they are ready and willing to come
Hmm.
together and get on that goddamn rowboat
Yeah.
to help their loved one, that it would be such a valuable resource, right? So it's
Yeah.
not to say it isn't a brilliant title, but god damn it, from where I
Yeah.
sit and what I've lived through, it is tough.
It is, yes. And you are, and thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate your honesty with that. And I've gotten comments of people because I have worked, it's the reality of working treatment that I've had people who have passed away, whether it be overdose or they took their life, and they express the same thing as where was
Mm,
this book, 10 years ago, 5 years ago
mm,
when we needed it. And so I can imagine where that comes from. Like, I'm afraid to read this because it might trigger that there is something I could have done or didn't do.
mhm.
And but if anything, what you're doing for your own healing and your amends is you are paying it forward by being of service to others, and hopefully maybe some knowledges from here can use as a springboard to continue to reach that message out there. And so, so if anything, but yes, self-forgiveness and is going to be really important for you, and spreading
Yep.
your positive energy out there. Okay.
Yeah, and I would say, when I think about what I'm doing in the world right now, this book that I wrote, right, which is a
Mhm.
testament to the way I'm living and that it is possible.
Mhm.
And wanting to get on stages and share my story and
Yeah.
tell people about a modern approach to the 12 steps, that it's not religious, that it can be wildly
Yes.
practical to anything and anyone, whether you're an addict
Yes.
or not, right? When
Yes.
I think about, well, is this just my latest version of my deepest trauma wound of trying to fix and save? Is
Mhm.
it? And the truth is, I'm not sure yet. Maybe it is. I can't think of a better way to repurpose my pain if that is true. But what I can say for sure is I don't know, and I never really will, what would have saved my sister's life.
Mhm.
But I do know what saved mine.
Yes.
And from that place, you better believe I'm going to go out into the world and
Yeah.
shout my truth, my hardest things, and how I've overcome them from the rooftops to mitigate the shame that people are carrying around in their
Yeah.
cells in the hopes of saving someone else's life. And that gives me great hope
Hmm.
for the future.
And drive. Yep. Yep. And this is what you're supposed to do. And like myself earlier, this is when you find out what you want to do and your passion, you're unstoppable. I really feel like this is a second chapter of my life. And like you have that zest and that energy and that drive. And yeah, and so you're unstoppable. So
Hmm.
um yeah, I really appreciate the conversation. I really appreciate you sharing and opening up about your family and yourself and your own recovery, and allowing me to just be a part of that for your listeners as well.
Yeah, I mean, it really was like a real time session, honestly. And so I think people are going to get so much out of that
Yeah.
because it's one thing to take the wisdom you've learned over all of the years you've been practicing and hand that book over to the family that's
Hmm.
ready and together
Hmm.
and on board.
Hmm.
And it's another thing to
Yeah.
coach the family or the family member that's in my situation. And I
Hmm.
think this was a great challenge for you today to come on here and not really know that that's what we were going to get into. And yet
Yeah.
it still was such a rich and important conversation. So I deeply appreciate your time and your expertise. And I would love for you to just tell people where they can find out more about you. And we can add in anything you want at the show
Okay,
notes on the
sure.
bottom in terms of all the links. We'll include it in the show notes. So please let us know.
Yeah. Well, on my website, it's at drbrianlicuanan.com. You can find there a little bit about me, some of my other media appearances, podcast, TV appearances, and it says a little bit about my book and links to my book. You can find my book on Amazon, on Barnes and Nobles and other distributors. And you can find me also on Instagram and TikTok at Dr. Licuanan for both of those. So it's some of the ways you can get in touch with me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again and appreciate what you're doing.
You too. Take care.
Take care.
Waking up, I hear the desperation call. I turn my back and hit my head against the wall. Don't need a crucifix to take me to my knees. Whipping my mistakes to jump over the grief. Breaking the circuit, making it worth it. Oh, sick and tired of the voice inside my head. Never good enough, it's leaving me for dead. But perfection's just a game of make-believe. Hey, gotta break the pattern, find a new reprieve. Breaking the circuit, making it worth it. Oh, I am ready to make a change. I am big, that's my pain. There's a knowing deep inside. I gotta let this life. I can be brave and afraid at the same time. Practice self-compassion, start to calm my mind. Taking tiny steps to loving all of me. Trust the process, cause it's gonna set me free. Breaking the circuit.